Hey everyone, welcome back to cracking the GRE math subject test. We're still in the differential equations chapter. This is the 14th problem. And this problem is a little bit different. We don't actually have to solve a differential equation here, but we do have to use our knowledge of differential equations to solve this problem. Specifically, we're given this differential equation, sine xy dx plus g of xy dy, where we don't know what g of xy is, but we're told that this is an exact equation. And when we hear that word exact, then that tells us something very important. Specifically, if sine of xy is our function m of xy, and this function g is our n of xy, then it has to be true that the partial derivative of m with respect to y is equal to the partial derivative of n with respect to x. And that's what we're going to use to solve this problem. So let's see. The partial derivative of sine of xy with respect to y is cosine of xy times x. Chain rule. And the partial derivative of n with respect to x, well, that's just the partial derivative of g with respect to x. So we have some information here. We know that the partial derivative of g with respect to x is x cosine xy. So we can integrate x cosine xy with respect to x, and that should give us g up to some constant function of y. Well, let's see. This is going to require integration by parts, so let's call this part here u, and this part here dv. So we know from integration by parts that the integral of u dv is equal to uv, that's x. Now what's v? V is going to be sine xy divided by y minus integral of v, again, sine xy divided by y, du. Well, what's du? Du is just going to be dx. And let's continue here. So we have x sine xy over y minus this integral. What's the integral of sine xy with respect to x? It's going to be negative cosine xy divided by y. Okay, so negative and a negative makes a positive. Cosine xy divided by y, but we already have a y in the denominator, so we're going to end up with y squared. Now, all of this is, we're going to have to add some constant function, let's call it h of y, because we know that g is a function of x and y, and we just integrated here with respect to x. So we're going to have to add some constant function of y, which we don't know what it is yet, but we can figure it out because we're given this information that g of 0y is equal to 0. So if we take this thing, remember that this is g, this whole thing is g of xy. Okay, so now we're going to use the fact that g of 0y is equal to 0. This implies that, let's plug in 0 for x. Well, the first term is going to drop out. And the second term, cosine of 0, that's just 1. So we're going to have 1 over y squared plus this unknown function of y equals 0. This implies that our unknown function h is actually just negative 1 over y squared. Okay, so now we know what g is. Now we need to find out what is g of x1. So g of x1 is equal to, now we have to plug in 1 for y. That's going to give us x sine x plus cosine x plus h of y. Well, what's h of y? That's minus 1 over y squared. So, and y is 1, so that's going to give us minus 1. And which answer is that? That's answer B.